Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of our weekly NBA Insider video live stream notebooks right here on the one and only Bleacher Report app. And we thank everyone, as always, who tune in to our show on YouTube as well. We are coming to you live Thursday, November 6th, right after 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And there is a ton of news and notes, as always, to get into from around the NBA. I think where we have to start off, where the whole league is talking about, is Memphis, where Ja Morant returned to the Grizzlies, returned to the court last night, and another loss to the Pistons, where Ja put up 17 points on 6 of 19 shooting, 1 of 17 from three, and a continued lackluster efficiency from the floor, from the field for Morant in this first full season under new head coach Tuomas Isalo, which, if you remember, the Grizzlies shifted from Taylor Jenkins, the mainstay head coach, one of the more respected head coaches in the league, a product of the Mike Budenholzer coaching tree, in order to get away from his quote unquote losing the locker room and this new 5-out pace and space motion heavy offense that was installed under the assistant coach Noah LaRoche, who was also since fired in conjunction with the Taylor Jenkins departure from the Grizzlies. They inserted Tuomas Isalo, who won a championship with Paris basketball over in Europe, who was a very big proponent of pick and rolls. And now Ja Morant has run in the top 3 in the league of pick and roll action behind Trae Young, and he is still looking disengaged. And of course, the biggest flames of this fire came in his post-game press conference after the Grizzlies lost to the Lakers, where Blake Griffin called him out on national TV on Amazon about his effort. And since we've learned from conversations with people in and around Memphis that Morant was particularly responding to Isalo calling him out in a halftime situation and the post-game locker room about his lack of effort, his lack of leadership, and consistency. Now, that's not something that's going away. Isalo, from my understanding, dating back to his days with Paris and definitely continuing in Memphis, is a very direct, head-on, not necessarily confrontational, but someone who's not afraid of confrontation, afraid of direct communication with his players. He wants to have a open air, direct flow of dialogue in the locker room and certainly throughout all encompassing basketball operations for this organization. So for Morant to then come back from his suspension and then say basically that he doesn't have his jewel, it's very eerily similar to the circumstances with Jimmy Butler a year ago in Miami. The difference is, number one, Ja Morant, to our understanding, has not formally requested a trade. And number two, to my understanding from talking to multiple people around the situation, the Grizzlies are not going to be entertaining a trade for Ja Morant at this point in time. So we saw that graphic from my buddy Kelly Eco, now at Yahoo Sports, about there being a lack of connect between Ja and Isalo in that game last night against the Pistons. But they're going to hope that Morant comes back into the fold here, that he can eventually turn the page and turn this chapter to a more consistent effort and output as the lead guard in this heavy pick and roll situation. But this is definitely something the whole league is monitoring. And it's particularly interesting being that Ja Morant did not come to a extension agreement with the Grizzlies this summer, while Jaren Jackson Jr. came to a massive new contract extension with Memphis, and that was their entire offseason. They made trades and they cut players in order to fit Jaren Jackson Jr.'s next big deal into their salary cap sheet. So already this was starting to feel like a situation that was transitioning a bit into Jaren Jackson Jr.'s team and not Ja Morant's. But by all accounts, those two All-Stars maintain a very close relationship, and they are going to be the figureheads and the front, two guys of this roster with Desmond Bane out the door. And Memphis is going to hope that they can right this ship over the next 10, 15 games before we really get into trade season officially on December 15th, which, for those who aren't aware, that is the date where the majority of players who sign new contracts this offseason will become eligible to be traded. That situation in Memphis is without a doubt one of the leading situations that rival executives, when they come to New York. When I was at the Garden last night, there were a ton of people in town to watch Minnesota take on New York. And every single rival scout I talked to was mentioning Memphis. And they were also talking about New Orleans, where the Pelicans started off 0-5 before their first victory, led by a strong fourth quarter effort from Derek Queen. And the Pelicans, of course, under new leadership with Joe Dumars, who also brought in Troy Weaver, the former Pistons general manager, who was then with Washington for a few years. They trade CJ McCollum out. They bring in Jordan Poole. They make a very curious deal, giving Indiana their own pick back in a deal that was a secondary deal where the Pelicans originally got Indiana's 2026 first round pick that the Pacers sent to Toronto for Pascal Siakam. The Pelicans got that back from Toronto when they traded Brandon Ingram north of the border to the Raptors. But then they also, of course, sent that very questionable, unprotected first round pick that could be the better of Milwaukee, Indiana, and New Orleans all the way to Atlanta for Derek Queen. And the Hawks are very happy with that asset, while the Pelicans are mired in a 2-6 start. They've won some games of late. Derek Queen certainly showing some prowess in this last couple of games. But Zion Williamson is out for at least a week now with a grade 1 hamstring strain. And this season, no matter what, was about Zion being consistent, being healthy, showing up in shape, and helping the Pelicans take a real step towards being a perennial playoff team and not just this idea on paper. That's what they were throughout the last couple of years of David Griffin's tenure as the executive vice president of basketball operations for the Pelicans. And that is, of course, not the circumstance right now, as we're going to see him on the sideline for at least another week. Who's to say how much longer? And to me, the real ripple effect of this dynamic is what will that ultimately mean for Willie Green, whose status as the head coach in New Orleans has been a question dating back to last season, where there was plenty of noise, plenty of conversation that David Griffin wanted to make a move at some point during the 2024-25 campaign and move and part ways with Willie Green in favor of associate head coach James Borrego, but ownership did not allow that to happen. Now, under this early start, where again the Pelicans are off to a position at the very bottom of the Western Conference, that noise and the questions about how hot Willie Green's seat is, they've certainly come right back up. It's something that every single person around the league is looking at. I don't have a sense right now as to how real that is, what the pressure actually could amount to in terms of a real changeover on the bench. But it's definitely something that rival coaches, rival executives are absolutely looking at. And it's only something that could really be turned around by winning basketball games. That's going to be hard to do if your franchise face former number 1 overall pick and multi-time All-Star when healthy Zion Williamson is on the sidelines. So we see it right there. He has missed more games due to injury than he has ever played in, and that is currently where we're at overall on the current season, where Zion is going to be out for at least the next 3 or 4 games. Let's get back to the chat here. And I want to pivot back to some of the Grizzlies questions that we got. The unit wanted to know, has Eatslow lost the locker room? Now, that's definitely not something that I have heard at this juncture. I think it's still a change from a previous coaching staff, and it still seems like everyone's starting to feel each other out and understand what the new direction is, what the new voice is. There's definitely still some players there, to my understanding, who would have appreciated if Taylor Jenkins was still around, but I don't think Eatslow has lost the locker room by any stretch. If the Grizzlies are forced to trade Ja, will the Grizzlies rebuild? I don't know if they'll ever be forced to trade Ja, and I definitely don't think they're looking at a rebuild whatsoever. I think they're looking at like a retool, kind of restructuring with that Desmond Bane trade. You saw them be aggressive in the draft and move up to get Cedric Howard. The Grizzlies are going to be very opportunistic when they have opportunities to get better. We've seen that time and again where they have done that very aggressively in the draft, but also they've done that in the offseason in terms of adding veteran talent. Marcus Smart did not work out necessarily for Memphis, but we've seen them put multiple first round picks on the table to make additions to push their roster closer to contention in the Western Conference. And they still have an additional three first round picks plus a 2029 pick swap with Orlando from that Desmond Bane trade in their artillery to go make additional moves. So if anything, I think Memphis still has their eyes set on spending to improve rather than tearing anything up into a rebuild right now. Zion to the Hawks for their pick back. Easy Dirty Birds wants to know. I don't think the Pelicans are in any stretch of looking at a Zion Williamson trade either, but every time you have a pick out the door to another team, like Easy Dirty Birds is pointing out, there's always an opportunity to go back and bark up that tree and try to send that pick back in the door. That's why the Pelicans, for a long time, after their Drew Holiday deal to Milwaukee, thought that they were in position potentially to trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo if he ever did ask out over the last several years, because New Orleans held this pick that they traded to Atlanta and other Milwaukee draft assets, but obviously they never got to that point in time. Z Saint wants to know, what could the Pels get for Zion that'd be worth his upside when healthy? Again, I don't think we're at a point where New Orleans is looking at Zion Williamson trades, but for both Ja and Zion, it'd be really difficult to pin down what their trade value really is because of their respective health, off court, and consistency issues. I think right now, you're definitely getting less than what Desmond Bane went for. And I think it's probably more closer to something like what the Brooklyn Nets got for Kyrie Irving when he was a distressed asset after all of the COVID, vaccine whatnots that that Kyrie went through with the Nets. I think there's going to be not as wide of a market for either of Ja or Zion when they finally would come to the open market in a trade circumstance. But for now, I want to reiterate, I don't think Memphis or New Orleans, either of those teams, would be looking at moving those guys anytime soon. I think for across the league, we're really right around approaching that 10 game mark into this season. I think most teams want 20 to 25 games of evaluation. Like the Houston Rockets, for example, they are without real point guard depth after losing Fred VanVleet to a torn ACL. They went into this year with Amen Thompson running the one. They wanted to see what Reed Shepard could do at the position. They are going to be a team to monitor for potential point guard additions all season long, but they're not going to be doing anything before a real healthy 20, 25 game sample size either. So we still have to wait, I think, until we get closer to Thanksgiving, closer to Christmas even, before any of that stuff really comes to fruition, particularly because also that December 15th trigger date, like we've talked about, when players become eligible to be dealt who sign new deals this summer, that just creates far more opportunity and a greater market for anyone to be traded. Our next topic here of today, the news that LeBron James is back and cleared for 5-on-5 full basketball activities, and he's going to be reevaluated in 1 to 2 weeks. So that's a big development for LA, especially now that Austin Reeves has been sidelined for a little bit here, but also being that the Lakers, of course, need their $50 million all-time Hall of Fame player who, when healthy, has still been an all-star, without a doubt. And we need to see what he could look like with this team, no matter what, because LeBron is in the final year of his contract, the first time in his career he has ever been playing on an expiring contract. And what that all looks like in advance of the Lakers potentially having a lot of cap space with LeBron and Austin Reeves set to reach free agency. Just like we're talking about sample size with all these other teams, Los Angeles is going to want as much of a sample size with LeBron next to Luka Doncic, next to Austin Reeves as they can possibly find, especially also with DeAndre Ayton, who we've talked about in past iterations of the show, was a win for the Lakers in the front court this summer. But what does all this group look like before the Lakers could have a potential opportunity to go out on the market and bring on a real, legitimate, long-term pick and roll lob threat partner for Luka, like they originally had coming in the door at the trade deadline with Mark Williams from Charlotte before they backed out of that deal due to his physical and failing his physical over various past injury concerns that he had when he was a member of the Charlotte Hornets. So LeBron being nearing a return is a massive development for various accounts. The Lakers just getting LeBron James back, number one, and the Lakers ultimately getting a larger and larger sample size to really see what this group can look like because they've already put out some type of signals that the Lakers will be shopping for two-way wings this season. Andrew Wiggins has been a name that's come up for them that we're going to monitor all season long, both for a Lakers trade target, but also how willing the Miami Heat will be willing to be to part ways with Andrew Wiggins after he came to the Heat as part of that massive five-team blockbuster that brought Jimmy Butler to the Bay Area. All this is shaping up to being a big combination of multiple inflection points for the Lakers where you need LeBron back to help you win right now, but you also need him back to see what this team looks like this season and how much you should invest in sending out draft capital to try to compete in the Western Conference where this team flamed out in the first round against Minnesota after getting the 3 seed last year. It was not a good matchup. I was talking to Wolves people who were in town in New York for the Nets on Monday and the Knicks last night on Wednesday. And the Wolves really did just think that they found a perfect first round matchup with their size overwhelm the Lakers. So this Lakers team is probably going to continue to be matchup dependent on how successful they can be in the playoffs and what weaknesses they want to improve on this trade market this season and what they want to do with the very important decisions of Austin Reeves reaching the open market this summer and LeBron James reaching the open market this summer are going to loom over Hollywood this entire season while they continue to adjust and enter into this Luka Doncic era for the foreseeable future after he signed a 3+1 contract extension this past summer. Now, on the Timberwolves that we just mentioned, Ghost316 in the chat wants to know, are the Timberwolves looking at trading Julius Randle? They're probably going to be aggressive in the trade market, right? The Timberwolves, to my understanding, are really happy with what this group looks like right now. And they just got Anthony Edwards back last night. Of course, they lost to the Knicks. That wasn't exactly the way you wanted to start the wagon with Ant coming back into the fold. But in Brooklyn on Monday, they ran a super big lineup. Head coach Chris Finch at one point in the fourth quarter went with Dante DiVincenzo at the one, Jaden McDaniels at the two, Julius Randle at the three, then Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert. The Wolves love going big. And I think I've written about this at the Stein Line, my joint Substack effort with Mark Stein. If you're not subscribed to us there, markstein.substack.com. And I was just reading the chat and got distracted. The Timberwolves, I think, were the first team, of course, after trading for Rudy Gobert and pairing him with Cat, having him, Cat, and Naz Reid. The Timberwolves started this new iteration of playing multiple 7-footers that we're seeing sweep across the league. And with that, there's been a lot of zone defense coming across the league as well. And I think Minnesota really values that optionality. They also really value Julius Randle being a secondary playmaker, creator next to Ant, taking some of the pressure off of him as a primary ball handler. That was something that they valued in that trade that sent Karl-Anthony Towns to the Knicks. So I really don't see them looking to trade Randle at all. I think he's a very big piece of what this team wants to do. And I think they've been very happy with the return. You know, they've signed him to a 2-year extension, a 3-year extension, excuse me, this past summer after his first year with the Timberwolves. So I don't see any Julius Randle trade coming in the near future. Are the Knicks trying to make trades? Well, the Knicks are very, very hamstrung with what their flexibility is, being just shy of the second apron. They're like $100,000 short of the second apron, so they don't have a ton of wiggle room to make deals. But it was a nice win last night in MSG, but it certainly has not been a super smooth start to the Mike Brown era after Tom Thibodeau led the Knicks to their first Western Conference Finals in a long, long time. So there's definitely stuff to monitor with the Knicks. They seem to be a super top-heavy team, right? And they were hoping to have more guard depth with Malcolm Brogdon in the fold before he retired, surprisingly, in the preseason. So that's a position that they clearly thought was a position of need, and they did not address it ultimately. So that's something to keep an eye on. But for now, I don't have any sense that New York is trying to make a trade at this juncture in time. The Utah Jazz made a lot of trades this summer, and one player that we thought was going to potentially be up for trade throughout this season, especially as we got closer to the trade deadline, was going to be Walker Kessler because he did not come to a contract extension off his rookie deal with Utah, and there was going to be, I think, a good market for him where the Lakers have obviously shown interest in the past. Phoenix showed interest this summer before they went and traded for Mark Williams. And I think any team that had a weakness at center come February, they were going to be looking and calling Utah about Walker Kessler, just being that it is certainly a question mark about what his future will look like with the Jazz after he did not come to any real significant momentum at all on a contract extension to stay around in Salt Lake City for the long term. So now him being out for the whole season, undergoing season-ending surgery earlier this week. It's a massive wrinkle in his situation and Utah overall because the Jazz, by all accounts, this year, with new president of basketball operations Austin Ainge in the mix, the Jazz have kind of taken the training wheels off of Will Hardy, and they have given him, to my understanding, more of a runway to actually go out and try to win games. So that would have been a real opportunity for Walker Kessler in a contract year to go out and perform. He was averaging a career high in points at 14.4 per game. He was taking a career high in threes. He was getting to the line at a career high free throw rate. He was showing a lot of dexterity and pick and roll and dribble handoff situations in this offense. The Jazz have really loved running multiple big men, three big lineups with him, with Larry Markkinen, with Kyle Filipowski. They did that a year ago with Kelly Olynyk in Kyle Filipowski's spot. So there was a lot of opportunity for Walker Kessler to continue to prove himself as one of the rising top big men in the league, an elite shot blocker as well. We have to mention that. And now he's going down after playing just 5 games. So it's not an ideal situation for Kessler, but he's still very young. Came out just as a freshman at Auburn. So he'll have still a market no matter what. But his market has to be suppressed compared to what it would have been if he had a strong, full campaign in a more winning situation in Utah, or at least a more competitive situation in Utah. So that is a big blow, I believe, for Walker Kessler, and it should have some ramifications on the center market, both for a trade in February before the deadline and then in free agency this summer. Marty Cohn 561 in the chat wants to know, do I think the Heat will add another quality role player to back up Bam? It's a good question because Sacramento earlier this week added Precious Achua, who spent the preseason and training camp with Miami, and the Heat, who are just below the tax and their salary cap accounting, they are going to have the opportunity to add a player on December 13th in just about 5 weeks here. And there are plenty of people who thought that Precious, because it's pretty standard around the league, just like Seth Curry in Golden State, like Landry Shamet did a year ago in New York. If you sign on a minimum contract with a team in training camp and are waived at a training camp, it's pretty common that there's some handshake agreements or some wink wink understandings of we're going to add you later on in the year when the cap hit on the veteran minimum salary is prorated to a point where it allows us to come in under the second apron, under the first apron, or under the luxury tax altogether. Precious Achua was someone that people thought was going to be doing that with Miami. So now that he goes to Sacramento, there is seemingly an opportunity for another center to be in that mix. So I do think that if they are going to bring someone around December 13th, it could very well be a center. KT80's baby wants to know, when is Fox coming back for the Spurs? I don't have a date on that. I don't know if the Spurs have a date on that, but the Spurs are rolling. They've lost a couple games, of course, but they started off really strong. They've got Steph Castle, they've got Dylan Harper. Dylan Harper, of course, has his own calf stuff, but I just don't think San Antonio is really in the business of rushing Fox back anytime soon. But I really don't have a sense of when he's coming back. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I can't update you there. Love how the outfit matches the hotel room. Thank you, E Divine. That was not intended, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. To Dallas, where the Mavs have started off 2-6, and Cooper Flag came out with a very sad, dejected quote after losing last night, saying he doesn't think he's lost this much ever. And it's probably right because the stats, I have him right here. As a rookie, as a freshman in high school, he led his high school to a 24-1 record and the state title in Maine. Then over 2 years at Montverde Academy, they went 56-3, including an undefeated 33-0 season. And Duke lost just 4 games. So from his freshman year, so for all of high school and college, he lost just 8 games. Dallas is already 2-6. So it's a difficult adjustment. And it's certainly difficult in Dallas, where, of course, this team was supposed to compete for a championship. And you can see the video rolling right here. The Mavs looked absolutely dejected coming off the floor last night with a difficult, close loss to those struggling New Orleans Pelicans that we talked about at the top of the show. And there was a lot of pressure on this front office and this coaching staff to win games after, of course, trading Luka Doncic to the Lakers and shocking the league. So they're starting to tinker a little bit with this group. They've been starting and throwing Cooper Flag out at point guard for this opening stretch of his rookie campaign, which is obviously not his natural position. The first big tinker of the year from head coach Jason Kidd. As you see, Klay Thompson went to the bench and they inserted D'Angelo Russell, but they don't have a lot of options right now at the guard spot. Jason Kidd kind of sent out a message like it's only D'Angelo Russell and Brandon Williams as they await for a return for Kyrie Irving. So I really don't see where the major improvement can come for the Mavericks until Kyrie comes back. The Mavs themselves don't have any real wiggle room with their own tax sheets as well. And it's going to continue to be a real difficult situation just with the overall context of where that whole fan base is still chanting for Nico Harrison to be fired. And the more they lose, that pressure is only going to mount. Stacy Van Diver wants to know, is Charlotte in the big slash forward market? Have not heard anything about Charlotte being active at this juncture in time. However, the Hornets do want to take a little bit of a step forward. They just sent TJ and Salwan down to the G League, and he's going to be focusing on developing a lot of rebounding and more big man type stuff and attacking closeouts. So maybe he can come back into the fold at some point in time and provide some more front court effort and assurances there. Are the Mavs concerned with AD's injury history? If they were concerned with AD's injury history, they wouldn't have made the trade. I think that's all you need to know there. Our final topic here, Chicago Bulls. They are first in the Eastern Conference. Bucci Mane and Josh Giddey have led Chicago to a 6-1 start. They do have a little bit of a stronger stretch here, but they've beaten good teams. They've come back and beaten Philly. They've made multiple fourth quarter comebacks. Their last was a 24-point comeback, and Josh Giddey has looked every bit as worth his 4-year, $100 million contract. To me, the most interesting thing about this is that the Bulls, no one expected them to be this good. And what does that mean for their trade situations moving forward? If anything, I do wonder if this just helps improve Nikola Vucevic's opportunities to go play for a true contender. But maybe Chicago is one. The East is wide open, and they're beating all these teams. They're knocking off everyone who is supposed to be at the top of their conference. So maybe Chicago looks to add their team that has some spending power and has some future flexibility with they could be a cap space team next year. But I was always looking at Chicago this year and wondering how good can their situation be? How good can Nikola Vucevic be now that he's an expiring contract to ultimately be a trade target for a team looking for center help? Now, this completely changes everything. Can this start continue? What does this mean for the ultimate trajectory of where Chicago is heading this season and beyond, especially if Josh Giddey continues to perform at an all-star level? I mean, Juju's saying Giddey needs more attention. He's been hooping. He has been. Right now, Josh Giddey is absolutely a leading contender for most improved player of the year, and he's putting up all-star caliber numbers, flirting a triple-double every night. United Trades wants to know, would the Bulls look into trading Trey Jones or Kobe? That's the thing. How good Josh Giddey is, I wonder, what does that mean for the future of Kobe White? He's going to be looking for a big payday next year as well. Some people have talked about him wanting $40 million. You see it right there. Bulls players in franchise history with back-to-back triple doubles, Josh Giddey and Michael Jordan. That's it. That's the type of start that Josh Giddey has been having. Hopkins Mavs wants to know, or just says the Mavs and Bulls should do a trade. Send AD home to Chicago. I don't think Dallas is trading Anthony Davis. I don't think they're Nico Harrison's pointing at Anthony Davis and saying, I want you to lead our defense to a championship. I don't want Luka Doncic, and they're just flipping him right away. I don't see that at all. Tino Stevenson, our final chat question here says, how possible is Lowry to the Pistons? Seems like a perfect fit for Cade. That has always been a spot for Lowry that has been interesting to me because the Pistons do have some spending power and some cap space they can play with moving forward. And they've got various salaries from Tobias Harris on down that they could send out. And to my understanding, Detroit last year was looking at Naz Reid, Santi Aldama, Miles Turner, all stretch big caliber players to give them an additional look to their Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart kind of powerhouse, strong, burly, paint present big men that they already have. Larry Wood certainly fit the bill of a different look, a different stretch five kind of talent. He's more of a 4-3, but he's a legit 7 feet and he shoots that thing. So I've always kind of wondered if Larry Markkinen does fit the bill in Detroit, but I haven't heard of the Pistons really looking to make major moves like that right now at this early juncture in the season. And Utah, I still think, is focused on growing this group little by little. They're really happy early with the return of Keontae George so far, too. So we'll see how all that continues to mesh in Utah. And we will see you back next week on another edition of our Video NBA Insider live stream notebook right here. For now, thank you for your questions. Thank you for tuning in. And we hope you all have a great weekend and enjoy the basketball. See ya.